Welcome to my Rebels guide. This comp is a late game powerhouse and can be very hard to deal with once it gets online. In this video, we will go over the build, what items you make, how to play the early, mid and late game, how to position your units, and lastly, we go over how the different galaxies change your game plan. The level 8 build looks like this. You have 6 rebels plus GP and Ezreal. We choose to run Zed over Yasuo. This is because Zed can steal AD off an enemy carry, while Yasuo is more or less just a rebel bot in this comp. Jinx is your main carry. Therefore, we run GP and Ezreal. These two units are Jinx enablers, meaning that their role is to let Jinx ult as early as possible. Ezreal gives Blaster, which lets Jinx attack multiple enemies. This way she will ult even if she gets stuck on a tanky unit like the mech. GP gives a huge AoE stun with his ultimate as long as you have Demolitionist. It also does some damage. This delays the enemy's CC spells, resulting in Jinx being able to stay safe longer. At level 9, you add in either Thresh, Blitz, Echo, or Fizz. What you add in depends on the lobby, so we will go over which unit to add in specifically later. Jinx is your main carry in this comp, so you want to prioritize making items for her first. After that, GP and Aesol are your secondary carries, so we make items for them after. The only exception to this rule is GA. This is an essential item for GP, as sometimes he won't ult without it, and the GP ult going off is essential for this comp. Therefore, you prioritize making GA, then Jinx items, then Aesol or GP items. The best items for Jinx and Rebels are items that scale with the extra damage you get with the Rebel buff. For example, Red buff does not get affected by the Rebel trait and will do just as much damage without the Rebel buff. However, a Deathblade scales with the extra damage you get from the Rebel buff. Therefore, the best items for Jinx are Last Whisper, Deathblade, and Runon's Hurricane as the third item. In the current meta, Vanguards are in a ton of the strongest comps like Vanguard Mystics, Astro Snipers, as well as Cybernetics. Because of this, Last Whisper is a core item for Jinx. The second item you want is a damage item. This is preferably a Deathblade, but IE works too. The third item for her is preferably a Runon's. This item synergizes extremely well with Deathblade, and it also allows Jinx to ult faster. Another option is Giant Slayer. This item is fantastic versus units like the mech or protectors. The tankier the enemy teams are, the more valuable this item is. Another option is Red buff. This item is still good on Jinx, but it's not great. If you get dropped a ton of bows, RFC is a great option for Jinx as she never has to move. This keeps her safe as well as giving her higher DPS. Some of you may be asking yourself, why no defensive items? The reason why we don't prioritize making defensive items is that Jinx gets a big shield from the Rebel buff. In other words, the Rebel synergy is our defensive item, so she doesn't really need another one. But if you can't make a third offensive item for Jinx, a GA, Dropclaw, or QSS can still work well on her. GP wants GA. As mentioned earlier, this is a core item for both GP and the Rebel comp as a whole. After GA, you can make Ionic Spark, Frozen Heart, or any AP item on him like Deathcap, Jewel Gauntlet, Ludens, or Hand of Justice. Aesol wants either AP items or tank items. You won't really prioritize making items for him, you're just looking to pick up items from future carousels. The best items for Aesol are Morello, any AP item, Bramble Vest, Warmogs, Dragonclaw, or Hextech Gunblade. I have made a general early game guide where I go more in depth into how to play the early game, but I will go over how to play the early game specifically for Rebels here. The carousel priority is BF Sword, Chain Vest, Glove, then Bow. Sword and Chain are the two best by far. Whichever you find is less contested in the starting carousel is the one you should go for. In the early game you want to pick up units that you can 2-star and that synergize well together. You want to prioritize picking up Blasters, Brawlers, and Rebel units. But if you find other units that you can 2-star, you want to play them instead. I have made some early game boards that you can aim for in your games. First one runs 3 Rebels with Brawlers. Ziggs is your main carry, but you can also take out Illaoi for Nocturne to make Zed your main carry. Second one runs 3 Cybers with Lucian as your main carry. This is insanely strong if you can make a red buff on him with 2 Blasters. If you don't have red buff, you can take out a 1-star Graves for a 2-star Vanguard. Third one runs 3 Star Guardians. This runs Ahri as your main carry. Although Ahri is not the best item carrier for Jinx, she is just an insane unit in the early game, and with 3 Star Guardians, she will ult a lot more often and do a lot more damage. Fourth one runs Brawler Chrono. This is very strong and very flexible. You can take out Ahri and TF for Caitlyn and Ashe, or you can take out TF and Ahri for 2 Blasters. In the early game, we want to make items that are flexible and that can fit into a lot of different comps. Although this is a Rebels guide, I will not advise you force Rebels every single game. Some great and flexible items early game are Last Whisper, Red Buff, GA, Ionic Spark, Bramble Vest, Zephyr, and Redemption. If you get an early 6 2-star, you can make Blue Buff on him to win streak. Blue Buff is not the best item for Rebels, but the amount of strength you get from it on a 6 2-star will allow you to save so much HP during the early and mid game that it's worth to make. Be careful using up components for GA and Last Whisper. These are core to the comp and you will do a lot worse without them. But if you do end up using a component for either of them, it's not the end of the world, as you will most likely get another component for them later. Just know that there is some amount of risk to doing this. In the early game, you either play aggressive to win streak or you play passive to focus on ecoing with a losing streak. If you are strong in the early game, level to 4 on stage 2-2. If you're still streaking by stage 2-5, level to 5 there. If you're not leveling, make sure to have at least 10 gold on stage 2-3. If you get a 4 item 2 gold start, you will be poor in the early game. So in that case, make sure to have at least 10 gold by stage 2-5. At the Krugs round, you should have a good idea of whether Rebels are going to be a viable option or not. Rebels can support 2 to 3 players at max, so scout to see what other comps people are playing in the lobby before you commit. At Krugs, you want to have at least made one Jinx item as well as being close to a GA. I have made a general mid-game guide that I will link in the description, but I will go over how to play the mid-game for Rebels specifically here. In the mid-game, you want to have a mid-game carry. Then you build your board around that carry. The mid-game carry is a unit that can use the items you have made well as benefiting from the synergies you have on the board. I have made some mid-game boards that you can aim for in your games. First one runs 3 Cybers with either Lucian or Vayne carry. Either of these boards are great, just know that if you're playing Lucian carry, you need 2 blasters, and if you're playing Vayne carry, you need 2 snipers. Second one runs 3 Rebels with Infiltrators. The Alawi can be swapped out for any Brawler, and the Nocturne can be swapped out for any Infiltrator. Third one runs 4 Brawlers with Kog'Maw as your carry. Red Buff is insanely strong with this build as you get multiple Battlecast procs during a fight. Fourth one runs Ahri and Syndra as your main carries. You can run either 4 Vanguard or 4 Sorcerers with this. In the mid game, you want to either play aggressively and try to win streak, or play more passive to focus on econ. However, you should always level if you can stay above 40 gold after you have leveled. You should always consider leveling if you can stay above 30 gold after leveling. Whenever you want to level, you should have something good to put in, that gives you something in terms of frontline, synergies, or damage. Do not level to put in a Malphite 1-star that gives you no synergies. If you are rich and want to level, but you are weak and have nothing good to put in, consider rolling once or twice to find something good to put in. This is not something I do often in my games, so don't make it a habit to roll in the mid game. In the mid game, it is common to level to 6 on stage 3-2. If you're on a 4+ win streak, consider leveling to 7 on 3-5. Be careful with doing this, as you need to be one of the strongest people in the lobby if you're going to do this. Now, units like Master Yi, Yasuo, and Zed are not commonly used in the mid game. So at what point do you start holding these on your bench? The 2 things you need to consider is how contested the units are and how much money do you have. My general rule of thumb is to always hold 6 from stage 3 and onwards. The rest of the rebel units you start holding once you are above 50 gold, meaning you don't lose money by holding a Yi, Yasuo, or Zed. If those units are contested, typically by a 6 BM player, you want to hold at least 1 of each on your bench as long as you stay above 30 gold. When you have downtime in the mid game, you need to scout to see what comps are open and which are contested. If you see there are a lot of Jinx and Rebel players, you might want to consider playing another comp. Comps that use similar items as Rebels are Cybernetics, Brawler Blasters, and Astro Snipers. At the Wolves round, you should be 100% sure of your game plan going forward. At this point, you should know what comp you are going to play. You start off by leveling to 7 on stage 4-1. Here you need to decide whether or not you can level to 8 and roll on 4-3. After you've rolled at level 8, you need to decide whether or not you can go level 9. This depends on the amount of 2-stars you have, how good your items are, and the amount of health you have. Before you can go level 9, you need at least 1 GP as well as Jinx 2-star. You also need to have 4 to 5 more 2-stars on your board. Most of the time you will not find ASOL and GP 2-star at level 8, so going level 9 to 2-star them is generally a good idea. The more health you have and the better your items are, the less 2-stars you need to be able to go level 9. At level 9, you add in either Thresh, Blitz, Fizz, or Echo. You add in Thresh when you're strong and you want to win harder by pulling in more great units. I have a general thresh pull tier list that I will put on the screen, but know that this is a general tier list. Therefore, some units are better versus different comps than others. If your Jinx is having trouble ulting, you want to add in Blitzcrank. This is because he pulls in a unit so that Jinx can get an easy first kill to ramp up her ultimate. He also gives you both Chrono and Brawler buff. The third option is to add in Infiltrators. You do this if there is a backline carry that you are struggling to kill. This is typically a Jinx, Vayne, Jhin, Teemo, or Xerath. Echo is a better unit than Fizz. However, he is harder to 2-star, so the priority is like this. Echo 1 goes in over Fizz 1. Fizz 2 goes in over Echo 1. Echo 2 goes in over Fizz 2. Another option you can do is run 4 Mystics. This is only done if there are only magic damage comps left in the game. To do this, you drop Yasuo, Yi, and Zed. You're running 3 Rebels plus GP and Ezreal. This is something you rarely do, as you don't want to take out a bunch of 2-stars to put in 1-star Mystics. In most of my games, I either put in Blitz or Echo as my level 9. First, I will go over general positioning with this comp, then we'll go over some more in-depth positioning examples. General positioning looks like this, where you have GP in the front line. This is so the enemies all focus the GP, and most units will walk towards him so they can get in range to attack him. Because of this, more enemies will be hit by a stun, causing him to do more damage. If you don't have GA on him and he's only 1-star, you will need to pull him back a row or 2 so he actually gets to ult. You keep your Jinx in the middle of the pyramid, so she gets the most buffs from the shields as well as staying safe on the back row. You want to have Asol in a corner so that he gets targeted by Blitzcranks. Because he has a built-in QSS, he will never get hooked and the enemy Blitzcrank will end up doing nothing. Besides that, you want to have 6 in the back row, and you want to have Malphite, Yi, and Zed to be on the top 3 tiles of the pyramid. Since this comp has no backline access, it's all about finding the most efficient way to get through the front line. Moving on to some more in-depth positioning examples. Against the first guy, the big threats are Xerath, Wukong, and the Shroud of Stillness. We position on the right side to dodge the Shroud. We want to focus down the Wukong as we can hopefully take it down before it ults. We want Nautilus to ult the GP so that his stun doesn't get too much value. We want Zed to jump on the Xerath so that he can deal some damage to it and hopefully kill it before he dies. Against the second guy, the big threat is Jinx. When positioning against him, it's all about making the enemy Jinx ult as slow as possible. Therefore, we want Asol on the right corner so that Blitzcrank doesn't pull anything. We want the enemy Jinx to target the GP, as when GP goes into revive mode with GA, the Jinx doesn't get a reset. Additionally, we want the Gnar to target the GP. This is because when the Gnar ults, it will only knock back the GP as everyone else is targeting Vi. We also have split up Ezreal away from the Rebels so that he gets targeted by the Vi ult. Against the third guy, the big threats are the Syndra and Victor. The mech is low level and it has no tank items, therefore it's not really scary. Victor targets the 2 units that are the furthest apart from each other. Therefore, we can make a large distance between GP and Ezreal, resulting in him ulting between those 2. The only thing you need to do is to make sure that Jinx doesn't walk into the Victor ult. In this example, she will walk up 1 row and start shooting the mech. It is hard to play around Syndra as she targets the units with the most health. Since the Rebels get a big shield at the start of the fight, it will pretty much be random which one she ults, as most of the unit will not have lost health by the time she ults. Against the fourth guy, we want to take out the enemy GP as fast as possible as he's only 1-star and doesn't have GA. We put Jinx on 3rd row as she spends less time walking up. We are hugging the right side with all the units so that they all target the GP. Asol is in the corner again so that Blitzcrank doesn't hook anyone, and we positioned Zed so that he targets the enemy Master Yi. Against the 5th guy, we want to position on the left side. This is because we want Jinx to focus down the frontliners without GA first. To beat this guy, it's all about finding the most efficient way to break through the frontline so we can deal with the Cassiopeia. Lastly, we will go over how the different galaxies change your game plan. In the Galactic Armory, if everybody gets dropped good Jinx items, you need to scout a lot. There will be multiple people trying to play Jinx, so try to play something else if you can. On the Binary Star, never put a defensive item on Jinx. She needs 2 damage items. Use Asol and GP as backup carries, and also itemize Echo and Fizz or Master Yi if you make it to super late game. On Little Legends, Rebels is a bit weaker as they usually want multiple 2-star legendaries. With the game being a lot shorter, it will be a lot harder to make it to level 9. And the Nicoverse, consider double Nicoing Jinx if you find her in the early mid game. If not, you usually double Nico Acel or GP. On Star Cluster, nothing really changes. Sometimes it's worth to go for gold instead of an item, as you get 8 gold from a 3 cost after selling it. Super Dense Galaxy doesn't really change much, just add Blitzcrank at level 8 and add Thresh or the Infiltrators at level 9. The trade sector doesn't really change much, just know that everyone is a lot stronger here, so be careful when evaluating the relative strength of your board. On Treasure Trove you get a lot more items, so itemize GP and Acel after Jinx, and you can also slam items more often here as you get a lot more components. Thank you so much for watching. If you learned something, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If you want to get better at TFT, join the Discord. It is a community filled with a ton of other players who are hungry to climb. If you want to get coached by me, the information is on the Discord as well. Take care and see you in the next video.